We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You're listening to Carousel Sniper Victim, a Dead Glass Design production, with your host, Shaun Jeffery.
Damn tough life full of toil and strife we whalermen undergo, and we don't give a damn when the day is done how hard the winds did blow. 'Cause we're homeward bound from the Arctic around with a good ship taut and free, and we don't give a damn when we drink our rum with the girls of old Maui. Rolling down to old Maui, me boys, rolling down to old Maui. We're homeward bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui. Once more we sail with a northerly gale towards our island home. Our mainmast sprung, our whaling done, and we ain't got far to roam. 6 hellish months we passed away on the cold Kamchatka Sea. But now we're bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui. Rolling down to old Maui, me boys, rolling down to old Maui. We're homeward bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui.
Ghost ship stories are as old as time. Maritime history is full of legends of ships that sail the world's oceans, manned by ghostly crews that are destined never to make port again. The most well-known of these tales is probably that of the Mary Celeste, an American merchant brigantine discovered adrift and deserted in the Atlantic Ocean off of the Azores Islands on the 5th of December, 1872. The last entry in the log of the Mary Celeste was dated 10 days earlier. Her cargo was intact and the captain and crew's personal belongings were undisturbed. None of those who had been on board were ever seen or heard from again. Now, whilst the story of the Mary Celeste is indeed a curious and well-known tale, one of the eeriest maritime legends has to be the apocryphal tale of the mystery of the Octavius. Apocryphal because some doubt whether the events are true. Some say it may be an amalgamation of several different maritime stories rolled into one. A sort of scary bedtime story for sailors of the open sea. Whether or not the legend of the Octavius is a factual account of true events, or merely the embellishing of some similar maritime stories, the legend of the Octavius is intriguing and unsettling all the same. Our story begins in the year 1761. The Octavius, a 3-masted, merchant-style trade ship, was docked in the busy port of London, ready to take on cargo destined for China. Whilst in China, the Octavius will pick up some of the most valuable trade commodities on the market at the time: spices. During the high and late medieval periods, Muslim traders dominated maritime spice trading routes throughout the Indian Ocean, tapping source regions in the Far East and shipping spices from trading emporiums in India westward to the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, from which overland routes led to Europe. This was in the time before the southern tip of Africa had been charted by the Dutch, although some claim the south coast of Africa was navigated by an Egyptian sailor under the command of Ptolemy III. The spice trade was eventually changed by the European Age of Discovery, during which the spice trade, particularly in black pepper, became an influential activity for European traders. The Cape route from Europe to the Indian Ocean, via the Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of Africa, was first navigated by the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama in the year 1498, resulting in new maritime routes for trade all the way from Europe to Asia by sea. This spice trade, driving the world economy from the end of the Middle Ages well into the modern time, basically ushered in the age of European domination in the East. But, for now, we're docked in port in London, readying the ship Octavius for its journey to the Far East. Once all the necessary preparation had been accomplished for the journey, the majestic sailing ship left port with a full crew, the captain and his wife and son on board. The trip along the spiced route to their destination of the Asian mainland would take a year to complete. The Octavius, now fully loaded for the journey, sailed south from London. The maritime spice route would take her south, past the coast of France, past Spain, Portugal, continuing south all the way down the west coast of Africa, finally reaching the Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of the African continent. When following the African coast south down from the equator, the Cape of Good Hope marks the point where a ship would begin to turn and travel more eastward than southward. Essentially, you're rounding the bottom end of Africa now. You're on the way to Asia. After rounding the Cape of Good Hope, the Octavius sailed on a direct heading across the Indian Ocean, straight for the Asian mainland. They arrived safely in China the following year, 1762. After a journey of some 15,000 kilometres or 9,300 plus miles, they could now finally unload their cargo in their destination. Once the Octavius was unloaded, she could be reloaded with goods for the return journey, spices and other valuable goods destined for British shores. This is when things start to go wrong. The weather was unusually warm this year. Winter was approaching, but the weather was, for now at least, reasonably mild in the immediate area of the China Sea. When looking back at these events with the power of hindsight, which is 2020 and so clear years later, it can seem as though Mother Nature is almost luring the captain into a false sense of security. Go on. Make a mistake. Come on in, Captain, the water's fine. It's at this stage that the captain of the Octavius made a fatal mistake. Rather than returning to London via the well-known maritime spice route they had come by, back around the southern tip of Africa, up the west coast of the continent and on to Europe, he instead decided to attempt to sail home via the Northwest Passage. It would be quicker than the year-long journey back along the established spice route. However, it was a voyage that, at the time, had never been successfully accomplished. So what is this Northwest Passage that the captain of the Octavius speaks of? As we know, the trip from Europe to Asia is a long one, over 15,000 kilometres and taking over a year to complete. Basically, everyone was sick of having to sail all the way around Africa and a lot of the time dying before you got to your destination. There had to be a quicker way. England called this hypothetical northern route the Northwest Passage. The desire to establish such a route motivated much of the European exploration of both coasts of North America. It was thought that perhaps you might be able to find a way to sail through the continent of North America and emerge on the other side, shortening the journey by thousands of kilometres. When it became apparent that there was no route through the heart of the continent, attention turned to the possibility of a passage through northern waters, around the top of America. There was a lack of scientific knowledge about conditions in such regions though. For instance, some people believed that seawater was incapable of freezing. As late as the mid-18th century, Captain James Cook had reported that Antarctic icebergs had yielded fresh water, seemingly confirming this hypothesis. Explorers thought that if salt water can't freeze, then obviously there must be an open route close to the North Pole. The belief that a route lay far to the north, around the top of the American mainland, persisted for several centuries and led to numerous expeditions into the Arctic that most ended in disaster. The captain of the Octavius, though, for some reason, seemed to think he could succeed where others had failed. Rather than spend a year sailing back along the established trade route, they would attempt to return to London via the Northwest Passage. This decision, ultimately, would prove to be a disastrously fatal one. As the Octavius sailed out of the port in China, leaving behind the rich trading hub and spice islands of the Far East, it would be the last port it ever sailed from. The Octavius would never arrive at its destination in London. This was the last anyone heard of the vessel, her crew, or her cargo. The Octavius was declared lost. So we must for now leave the Octavius, lost to the frigid, frozen waters of the Northwest Passage, and will now board the whaling ship Herald. On the 11th of October, 1775, the whaling ship the Herald was working the frigid waters off the west coast of Greenland when it spotted a sailing ship. On nearing the ship, the crew saw that the three-masted schooner was weather-beaten. The sails were tattered and torn and hanging limply on the masts. The captain of the Herald ordered a 5-man boarding party to go overboard in one of the small rowboats and approach the mysterious vessel. The captain, though, unable to contain his curiosity, jumped aboard the rowboat as well. Upon approaching the ship, the boarding party could make out a faint, weather-worn name on her stern. It said, the Octavius. Here she was, 13 years since she'd been seen last, leaving the Far East and heading for the Northwest Passage. The captain observed that the hull was miserably weather-beaten, and not a soul appeared to be moving on the deck, which was covered with snow to a considerable depth. He hailed the crew several times, but no one answered in return. Before stepping on board, an open porthole near the main chains caught the eye of the captain, and on looking into it, he saw a man reclining back in a chair, with writing materials on a small table before him, but the faintness of the light made it hard to be sure. The boarding party went upon deck, and having removed the hatchway, which they found closed, they descended slowly into the cabin. They first came upon the apartment which the captain had viewed through the porthole. Now reading from supposed journals of the whaling ship Herald, quote, "A tremor seized him as he entered. Its inmate retained his former position and seemed to be insensible of strangers. He was found to be a corpse. A green damp mould had covered his cheeks and forehead and veiled his eyeballs. He held a pen in his hand and a logbook before him, the last sentence in whose unfinished page thus: 11th November, 1762. We have been enclosed in the ice 70 days. The fire went out yesterday, and our master has been trying ever since to kindle it again, but without success. His wife died this morning. There is no relief." The inkwell and other everyday items were still in their place on the desk. Turning around, the boarding party saw a woman, wrapped in a blanket on the bunk behind them, frozen to death, along with the body of a young boy. The boarding party was terrified. Grabbing the ship's log, they fled from the Octavius. In their mad flight, though, they lost the middle pages of the logbook that were frozen solid. They came loose from the book bindings. They arrived back on the Herald with just the first and last pages of the logbook, which were enough for the master of the Herald to determine the last part of the story of the voyage. The captain of the Octavius had tried to navigate the Northwest Passage, but his ship had become imprisoned in the ice of the Arctic, and the entire crew had perished. The ship's last recorded position was 75 degrees north and 160 degrees west, which placed the Octavius 250 miles north of Barrow, Alaska. As the ship was found derelict, adrift off the west coast of Greenland, 13 years later, it meant that the Octavius miraculously completed its strange voyage without a working crew. The ship must have broke free from the ice during summer months and periodically froze again, back and forth for years, moving a little bit further every summer, continuing to drift farther and farther east until eventually breaking free into the North Atlantic. If the account of the Octavius and her subsequent discovery by the Herald is a true one, the Octavius was the first ship to ever successfully sail through the Northwest Passage, although with only frozen corpses for passengers. The crew of the Herald was so frightened of the Octavius and feared that she was cursed, so they simply let it adrift. To this day, it's never been sighted again. A theory persists that the Octavius could be the same ship as the Gloriana, which was boarded in 1775 by the captain of the Try Again, John Warrens. He recorded that he found a frozen crew that had been dead for 13 years, and the date of the discovery was spookily similar, November 11th, 1762. Possibly these tales are of the same vessel. In the Gloriana story, though, there's no mention of the Northwest Passage, which to this day remains a place of mystery. The tale of the Octavius makes an excellent ghost story for around the campfire. Did the Octavius eventually run aground and sink? Or does she still sail the high seas with a crew of frozen sailors to this day? One ghost ship, however, is not a ghost ship in the traditional sense at all, as it was, or is, or might still be, very real. Built in 1914 in Sweden, the SS Bachimo was used for trading routes between Hamburg and Sweden. After World War I, the ship's ownership was transferred to the Hudson Bay Company. The ship made numerous sailings for Hudson's, mostly carrying cargo to and from the Arctic region. On October 1st, 1931, the Bachimo was on a routine voyage filled with recently acquired furs when an unexpected storm blew in, trapping the ship in a sea filled with ice. The closest city to the ship was Barrow, Alaska, the northernmost city in the United States, and the city that was actually south of the last known position of the Octavius. This city was way too far to get in the blowing snow and high winds. The captain and crew had decided to stay inside the ship, where they hoped to wait out the storm. By October the 15th, the ship remained locked in the ice, so 15 of the crew were airlifted to safety, while the captain and 14 other crew members made a temporary camp on the ice near the stranded ship. The terrible weather continued to pound down on the crew, and the temporary camp ended up lasting for weeks. A fierce blizzard hit the area on November the 24th, and the snow was so heavy that the campers could no longer see the Bachimo, which they assumed was still trapped in the ice just over there. The following morning, their worst fears came true. The ship had vanished, no doubt sunk by the preceding blizzard. The remaining crew made their way back to civilization. Less than a week later, however, a hunter told the captain that the Bachimo could not have sunk, as he had just seen it, floating in the icy waters almost 50 miles from the location where it had been abandoned. The captain was somewhat reluctant to battle the snows and try to find the ship, but he gathered his crew and indeed found the Bachimo in the location the hunter had described. The ship looked to have sustained significant damage, and so the captain feared it wouldn't be seaworthy for much longer and would soon break apart and sink. So the crew gathered the cargo of furs and had everything, including the captain and the crew, airlifted out of the area safely. And so, as far as the captain and everyone else was concerned, the story ended. But it didn't. Over the years, residents of the area and other ships have spotted the empty SS Bachimo numerous times, gliding silently across the Arctic waters, drifting from one location to another, still totally intact. In March of 1933, some local Inuit people, trapped by a storm, actually took shelter in the Bachimo for a week until the weather improved enough to journey back to their homes. In November of 1939, another ship came close enough to the Bachimo that they were able to board the abandoned ship. Due to the approaching ice floes, however, the captain did not have time to bring it back to a port, although he did report the empty ship's location to authorities. In 1969, the Bachimo was spotted at a distance, once again trapped in an ice pack. This was the last recorded sighting of the ship, and after a few years, it was commonly believed that the ship did eventually give in to its deteriorating condition and sink to the bottom of the frigid seas. Although, not all believe this. In 2006, 75 years after the ship was first abandoned, the state of Alaska formally began an effort to find the mysterious SS Bachimo, the Arctic's most elusive ship. Now being almost 86 years since the Bachimo was officially abandoned, it's more than likely it now has sunk to the bottom of the sea. But there is some chance that it is still out there, floating around from frozen port to frozen port, carrying a crew of no one and a cargo of nothing.
Oh, we'd be alright if the wind was in our sails. We'd be alright if the wind was in our sails. We'd be alright if the wind was in our sails. And we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. Oh, it'd be alright if we make it around the horn. Oh, it'd be alright if we make it around the horn. Oh, it'd be alright if we make it around the horn, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. Well, a night on the town wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, a night on the town wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, a night on the town wouldn't do us any harm, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old, we'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind.
God fucking damn it, how powerful are sea shanties, I tell ya. I'm in love. They're my new passion in life is sea shanties and podcasting. We're gonna go start a professional 4-piece sea shanty group and call it Cold Ones with the Boys. Cheers for listening, everyone. That's it for this episode. A few quick shout-outs, announcements, winners and whatnot. Shout out to Robots for Eyes, man. Their fucking most recent episode about Fukushima, the nuclear power plant and the tsunami in Japan. Holy shit, it was like well researched, and man, it was so fucking terrifying. I went through a big stage ages back getting all deep into the tsunami in Fukushima, and I'd basically forgotten all about it, and now they completely reminded me about how completely fucked we are and how it's just destroying the world. Ugh. So yeah, go check that out. This episode, big shout out, and this episode is basically brought to you by this artist in Perth, mate of mine. More I know her through a good mate of mine I used to work with, Linton. He's also an artist. He's in a band called Depravity. Go check that out. His missus, the Larnie, she's a fucking amazing tattoo artist, so if you ever want to get any ink done and you're in the Perth area, or you want to grab any of her prints, she does these fucking awesome prints, man. Like, her artwork is, I don't even know, it's like, it's awesome, like, colourful pop, like new school tattoo art, but the stuff she's doing lately is like a mix of, like, esoteric religious work, so, like, one of them's, like, Ganesh, or, like, is it, like, from the Bhagavad Gita, was that Krishna? I don't know, pardon my ignorance of Far Eastern religions or Middle Eastern religions, but yeah, it's like a multi-armed goddess, and in one hand she has a weed leaf, in one hand she has a mushroom, one other she's cradling the planet, and so well done, like amazing original pieces of artwork, so go check that out. Other than that, we've got an announcement of a winner coming up in the breakdown episode tomorrow, and also I apologise for how drunk we get and for how many sing shanties, how many sea shanties we sing. But yeah, alright,
cheers for that, yo. Catch us later. Have a good one. Sorry I'm rambling. I love sea shanties. I want to be a pirate. I'm gonna go join fucking pirate group somewhere. Arr. Just another quick pre-ear blowing out stereo car explodey warning. Another Arcadian song, Jack's band. These are, and also, the dudes from the Arcadian, Michael and Dan, singer and guitarist, they came around and they gave us a help with the crowd chant. So when you hear the shit, that's us doing all crowd chants, yo. That's what I meant when we're gonna go start a fucking sea shanty band. But this is the Arcadian, Disimprisoned. This is like my favourite song. Sick breakdown. Fuck what you want me to be. I have my own hopes and dreams. Yo. 3, 2, 1.